You're listening to a podcast powered by WOBI.
Hello, and welcome to the WOBI podcast, where we uncover ideas, stories, and strategies that inspire leaders and empower companies to evolve, thrive, and make a lasting positive impact. My name is Sophia, and I'll be your host for this episode, which is an audiobook-style summary of Dare to Lead by Brené Brown. Let me tell you a little bit about Dare to Lead. It's a book that brings together the core insights from Brené Brown's decades of research on leadership, vulnerability, and self-management. With her signature blend of clarity and warmth, Brené offers a practical guide designed, in her own words, to change how the reader thinks about leading, ideally sparking at least one meaningful behavior change. It's one of those must-reads that you finish thinking, gosh, I wish everyone would read this. Packed with examples, practical tools, and insights from her previous bestsellers, Daring Greatly and Rising Strong, this is more than a book on leadership. It's a playbook for how to live and lead with courage. This episode is a short and actionable summary of the main ideas, with a strong focus on the 4 teachable skills for being a courageous, daring leader. But honestly, the book goes way beyond that. So if anything you hear today sticks with you, I really recommend reading the whole thing. And hey, if you're into this episode or already love Brené's work, check out BrenéBrown.com. There's a ton of great stuff there to help you lead with more courage and heart. Let's start by talking a little bit about Brené herself. She's a research professor at the University of Houston and one of the leading experts on vulnerability, courage, empathy, and leadership. She's also the author of several best-selling books, including the ones I mentioned earlier, and also The Gifts of Imperfection and Braving the Wilderness, among others. On top of that, Brené's TED Talk on vulnerability is one of the most watched of all time, and she even has a Netflix special called Brené Brown, The Call to Courage. In this 1-hour program, she distills 20 years of research, sharing her insights with heart, empathy, and also a great sense of humor. With this being said, let's dive into the book itself. Dare to Lead covers a lot of ground, but at its core, it draws a powerful distinction between 2 styles of leadership: daring leadership and armored leadership. Daring leadership, on the one side, is all about embracing vulnerability and driving meaningful change. Armored leadership, on the other hand, is pretty much the opposite. And unfortunately, it's the style we tend to see most often in organizations. It's built on fear, control, and emotional detachment. The good news is that choosing courage and shifting toward a daring leadership style is totally within our reach. Brené breaks it down into 4 teachable skills, which is what we will discuss in this episode. First, rumbling with vulnerability, which is the foundation of it all. Second, living into our values. Third, braving trust. And fourth, learning to rise. Easier said than done, of course. These skills take time, practice, and especially, a word you'll be hearing quite a lot in the next few minutes, courage.
Part 1. Rumbling with vulnerability.
This is the first and most important step toward courageous leadership. To rumble with vulnerability, we first need to understand what vulnerability actually is. Vulnerability is the emotion we feel during times of uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. It's a natural human response. But, and here's the but, we've been conditioned to see it as a weakness, as something to avoid and control at all costs. To challenge this mindset, Brené unpacks 6 of the most common myths about vulnerability.
Myth number 1. Vulnerability is weakness.
It's actually not. And to challenge this myth, Brené shares a story. I'll tell you something, she loves a good story to make her point. And honestly, it works because it really helps you connect with what she's trying to say. In this one, she talks about a time when she asked a group of soldiers, "Can you give me a single example of courage? Something you've witnessed in someone else or experienced yourself that didn't require vulnerability?" No one could, because courage and vulnerability are inseparable.
Myth number 2. I don't do vulnerability.
Well, here's the thing. You can either choose to engage with vulnerability, or it'll end up choosing for you. It's something we all go through, whether we like it or not. So learning to rumble with it means paying attention to how it shows up in our lives and choosing to respond in a way that actually reflects our values.
Myth number 3. I can go it alone.
To bust this myth, Brené references neuroscientist John Cacioppo, who once said that real strength doesn't come from rugged individualism, but from our ability to connect, collaborate, and support each other.
Myth number 4. You can engineer the uncertainty and discomfort out of vulnerability.
I mean, you can try, but it won't work. What you can do is build the skills to move through discomfort and uncertainty with courage. That's the real work.
Myth number 5. Trust comes before vulnerability.
The sequence matters. You need to trust to be vulnerable, and you need to be vulnerable in order to build trust. Let me say it in other words. Trust and vulnerability grow together, and to betray one is to destroy both.
Myth number 6. Vulnerability is disclosure.
Nope. Vulnerability isn't about dumping your emotions on the table. It's about creating psychological safety, setting boundaries, and communicating with honesty and integrity. Let's keep going with vulnerability and what it really means to rumble with it. Now we're going to explore the idea of leading with wholeheartedness, or, as Brené puts it, living with an unarmored heart. Let me read you a short passage from the book because honestly, no one says it better than Brené. Leading with wholeheartedness means cultivating the courage, compassion, and connection to wake up in the morning and think, no matter what gets done and how much is left undone, I'm enough. It's going to bed at night thinking, yes, I am imperfect and vulnerable and sometimes afraid, but that doesn't change the truth that I am brave and worthy of love and belonging. Beautiful, right? But the reality is, and I'm sure many of you will relate, that in a lot of organizations and to many people, vulnerability is still seen as inefficient, unproductive, or just too messy to deal with. Brené argues the opposite, that when we lead with an open heart, when we're connected to our emotions and actually understand what they're trying to tell us, we make better decisions. Our critical thinking gets sharper, and we open the door to empathy, self-compassion, and real resilience. So, the big question, why is embracing vulnerability so easy to say, but so hard to actually do? If you guessed it's because of shame, you're absolutely right. Vulnerability puts us face to face with shame, and that's not a place anyone wants to be. As Brené explains, our ego will do whatever it takes to avoid feeling unworthy, disconnected, or not enough. But here's the tricky part. Even though shutting down vulnerability feels like self-protection, it actually does the opposite. It guarantees disconnection, shame, and isolation. So, how do we move through shame? Brené offers what she calls shame's 1-2-3s. 3 simple truths that help us face it and deal with it in a healthier way. Number 1, we all have shame, no matter our age, our experience, our role. You can either admit to experiencing shame or admit you are a sociopath. Up to you. Number 2, we're all afraid to talk about shame. Again, totally human. And number 3, the less we talk about shame, the more power it has over us. However, talking about shame is liberating. It helps us build what Brené calls shame resilience, the ability to stay true to who we are right in the middle of a shame spiral, to move through it without letting go of our values, and to come out the other side with more courage than we had going in.
Hey, it's Mark. Ever wondered what shame actually looks like in the workplace? In our organizations, shame can quietly shape the culture, showing up in behaviors like perfectionism, gossiping, back-channeling, tying self-worth to productivity, bullying, or covering things up. Sound familiar? I'll leave you with Sophia again.
Thanks for that, Mark. Now that we've introduced shame, it's impossible not to talk about empathy. Where shame exists, empathy is almost always missing. A lot of the time, our default response when trying to be empathetic is to fix things, offer advice, or try to make the other person feel better. And this happens mostly to ease our own discomfort. But Brené reminds us that what truly helps people heal is connection. It's not about turning on the light. It's about being willing to sit with someone in the dark. She outlines 5 core skills for practicing empathy. First, seeing the world as others see it. Second, being non-judgmental. Third, recognizing and naming what others are feeling. Fourth, communicating that understanding back to them. And finally, staying aware of the context, the emotions that we are all feeling and how we're reacting in the moment. And here's the thing, if we can offer empathy to others, why is it so hard to extend it to ourselves? Aha! That's where self-compassion comes in. Having self-compassion means resisting that urge we all sometimes have to punish or shame ourselves when we mess up, fall short, or simply don't meet our own expectations. And sometimes, self-compassion is as simple as being kind to yourself. Let me ask you something. Would you ever say to someone else the awful things you sometimes say to yourself? Of course not, because you know how much that would hurt them. So why do you do it to yourself? Let that sink in. Last piece on rumbling with vulnerability is grounded confidence. And no, we're not talking about loud, arrogant, blustery confidence. We mean the kind that's solid, steady, and built from the inside out. It's confidence rooted in self-awareness. Sounds simple, right? But you and I both know it's not that simple. And in fact, that's exactly how it should be. As Brené says, easy learning doesn't build strong skills. To be effective, learning has to be effortful. That's where the concept of desirable difficulty comes in. Let me give you a quick example. Have you ever gone to the gym and woken up the next day feeling sore? You know that feeling? The muscle burn? That burn means your muscles are getting stronger. Well, it's the same with your brain. When we're learning something new, that mental discomfort we feel, that's the brain working, adapting, and growing. That's desirable difficulty. Now, back to grounded confidence. For those of you with an engineering mindset or a methodical brain, you're gonna love this because there's a formula for achieving grounded confidence, and it's as follows. Grounded confidence equals rumble skills plus curiosity plus practice. Yep, you heard that right. I said curiosity. Why? Because it's a courageous act. It means opening ourselves to uncertainty, and it's deeply linked to creativity, intelligence, and problem solving. At this point in the book, Brené brings up one of her favorite examples of grounded confidence through curiosity, the scientist Albert Einstein. I'll pass it to Mark to wrap up this section with 2 of Einstein's most famous quotes.
If I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about solutions. It's not that I'm so smart. It's just that I stay with problems longer. Part 2. Living into our values.
Let's move on to the second teachable skill of daring leadership, living into our values. Why is this so important? Because when stress or uncertainty hits, our values tend to fade into the background, right when we need them the most. Daring leaders stay crystal clear on their values so that when everything feels like it's falling apart, they have something solid to come back to. Values are the compass that guides us when things get tough. But naming them isn't enough. We have to practice them every day on purpose. So let's get practical. What are the keys to living into our values? First things first, you can't live by your values if you don't know what they are. So take a moment to get clear on the 2 values that really define who you are and guide the way you show up. Brené has a list on her website you can use for inspiration, but it's not about picking the right ones. It's about choosing the ones that are true for you. I'm going to hand it over to Mark to read out a few examples. As you listen, take your time to notice which ones feel meaningful to you. You'll probably start with 10 or 15, but the challenge is to narrow it down to just 2. Take it away, Mark.
Thanks, Sophia. Here we go. Accountability, altruism, authenticity, courage, diversity, family, faith, freedom, gratitude, health, love, loyalty, optimism, peace, respect, success, trust, wholeheartedness. Just remember that your values don't have to be on this list. This exercise is simply meant to get you thinking and help you figure out what really matters to you. Back to Sophia.
Thanks, Mark. For Brené, her two core values are courage and faith. What about you? Do you have yours? Take a moment to reflect until you find them, and once you do, start living into them. All right, so the second step in living into your values is this. You've got to actually act on them. As you know, life's not about what you say, it's about what you do. Here's a simple way to get started. For each of your two values, think of 3 or 4 behaviors that really support them. You know, ways you show up when you're living that value. Why not pause the podcast for a moment and sit with this thought? Then think of 3 or 4 slippery behaviors, or in other words, the things you tend to do that you know don't align with your values, but that you sometimes fall back on anyway. This gives you something to check yourself against. Again, feel free to hit pause for a moment and think it over. Once you've identified those patterns, you can catch yourself and think, this doesn't really match who I want to be. Let me pause and make a different choice. All right, third point. To live into your values, you have to practice empathy and self-compassion, even in tough moments like giving and receiving feedback. So, how do we practice empathy when we're having those harder conversations? Brené suggests starting with a gut check, asking yourself these questions. Am I actually ready to listen? Can I accept that I might not fully understand the issue? Am I willing to talk through the challenge in a way that leads to growth and opportunity instead of defensiveness or control? That's what it means to lead with empathy and integrity. And on the flip side, when you're the one receiving feedback, practicing self-compassion is just as important. Brené shares 3 internal cues she uses herself, repeating them like a mantra when things get tough. I'm brave enough to listen. There's something valuable here. This is the path to mastery. Simple, grounding, and powerful.
Part 3. Braving trust.
Now we're on to the third skill of courageous leadership, braving trust. Trust is the foundation that makes vulnerability possible. And as you probably remember, rumbling with vulnerability was the very first skill we explored. Here's the question. How do you actually build trust? Brené breaks it down into 7 core behaviors that spell the word braving. It starts with boundaries, reliability, and accountability, and then moves into vault, integrity, non-judgment, and generosity. Each one is a building block, and when practiced consistently, they create the conditions for real, meaningful trust to grow within teams and relationships. If you're wondering how to bring this into your team, Brené has the answer. On her website, she offers a super practical tool called the Braving Inventory Worksheet. You can fill it out individually, reflect on where trust is strong, and where it might need some work, and then come together as a team to talk through it. Another option? Co-create a shared expectations worksheet to get clear on what trust looks like in action for your specific culture. The key here is making trust visible, tangible, and real. Not just something we talk about, but something we do. And here's something to really think about. Trust doesn't just go outward, it starts from within. Brené reminds us not to overestimate the link between self-trust and trust in others. Because how can you offer something you don't believe you deserve yourself? Let me wrap up this section with a quote Brené shares from Maya Angelou. And honestly, she nails it. I don't trust people who don't love themselves and tell me I love you. There is an African saying which is, be careful when a naked person offers you a shirt.
Part 4. Learning to rise.
We're coming to the end of this episode, and we're closing with the 4th and final teachable skill, learning to rise. And that means not just getting back up after the fall, but learning how to fall in the first place. Here's the thing. We can't ask people to be brave, take risks, or go all in if we're not also preparing them for failure. We need tools to get back up, to rise like a phoenix, because if we don't, the fear of falling will keep us from ever trying in the first place. Brené breaks this process down into 3 key stages: the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. Let's walk through them, shall we? First up, the reckoning. This is about recognizing when something has triggered you emotionally. Risers well know when it's happening, and instead of just reacting, they get curious. And yes, we're back to curiosity again, because it's just as important for grounded confidence as it is for learning to rise. So when something hits you hard and you want to rise instead of spiral, the first step is simple, but not always easy. Pause and stay calm. That might look like taking a breath, stepping back, or giving yourself a little space to reset. In Brené's words, calm is the ability to create perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. And why does that matter so much? Because just like anxiety, calm is contagious. In every tough moment, you as a leader have a choice. What energy do I want to put into the room? You can spread panic, or you can spread clarity. Next comes the rumble. If the reckoning is how we enter a tough story, the rumble is about what we do with it, the choices we make and how we make them. Our brains love order and predictability, so they make up stories to help us anticipate and react. But when uncertainty shows up, those stories are often full of fear and assumptions. And that first version, it's rarely the truth. Instead of defaulting to that narrative, Brené encourages us to pause and ask, what else do I need to know about the situation, about the other people involved, and about myself? This leads to what she calls the delta, which is the difference between the story we made up and the truth we discover by rumbling with it. Here's how she puts it. When we own a story and the emotion that fuels it, we get to simultaneously acknowledge that something was hard while also taking control of how that hard thing is going to end. We change the narrative. But when we deny the story or pretend we don't make up stories, the story owns us. It drives our behavior, our thinking, and eventually our emotions, until it completely takes over. And finally, the revolution. Brené doesn't shy away from that word, because rising strong isn't just about recovery, but transformation. She's deeply concerned about a world that's becoming less courageous and less authentic, but she reminds us, courage is a form of rebellion, and choosing authenticity and self-worth is a radical act of resistance. That's her revolution. And as we wrap up this audiobook-style summary, I want to leave you with 3 powerful insights Brené has gathered over years of research and leadership work. First, the level of collective courage in an organization is the single strongest predictor of its ability to build culture, develop leaders, and fulfill its mission. Courage is contagious, so be the first to spread it. Second, the greatest challenge in developing brave leaders is helping them hear and answer their personal call to courage. And third, and listen carefully to this one, we fail the moment we let someone else define success for us. Let's close with a quote Brené often references, one that speaks directly to the heart of this journey. It's from Joseph Campbell. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Dare to Lead isn't just a book about leadership. It's a deeply personal book about being human. It asks us to look inward, get honest about the stories we tell ourselves, and lead not from fear or perfection, but from courage. What makes Brené's message so powerful is that it's not rooted in abstract theory, but in lived experience. In those quiet, vulnerable moments we've all faced and often try to hide. The truth is, we've all missed the cue. We've all stayed silent when we should have spoken up. We've all put on the armor because it felt safer than being seen. And yet, that's exactly what this book and this journey is about. Recognizing that our imperfections are not the barrier to leadership, they're the path. If this episode resonated with you, there's more to explore. Check out the resources on Brené's website and stay tuned to the WOBI podcast, because we've got more stories and voices to share. Oh, and just one last heads up, Brené Brown will join us live at the World Business Forum this year in New York, Madrid, and Milan. If you're already a WOBI member, get ready, because you'll be hearing from her soon. And if you're not, well, this is your moment. Join WOBI and dive into everything we've got waiting for you. Until next time, be courageous, be kind to yourself, and remember, taking off the armor might feel risky, but it's where the real strength lives. I'll talk to you soon. Goodbye.